Hi and welcome to this video in which we're going to look at filtering responses and selecting responses automatically. Now, filtering responses is not the same as filtering questions. When we're filtering a question, we're only letting certain respondents answer that particular question. Filtering responses is where you only want to let certain responses be available to respondents because of answers to previous questions. So we're going to illustrate this by setting up a few questions and looking at some different scenarios that hopefully will explain that more clearly. So I'm going to start by entering a question. I'm going to call it question 1. We get that recommend QPSMR companion message. And the first question we're going to ask is which brands somebody ever uses. So which brands ever use, and I'm going to type in a list of brands here, and I think brands are a good way of illustrating some of the different scenarios that you might encounter. So I'm just going to put in those 5 brands, and that's my first question. And then I want to ask subsequently which one they pick most often. Now, of course, it should be only one of the brands they selected as ever used, so I'm going to copy this entry, paste it back, and paste it back as question 2. And I'm going to change it to single actually because we want to know which one it is most often. And the responses, of course, are the same, but I'm going to add a filter. And I'm going to apply a response filter here, and I'm going to pick question 1 and apply that to the entry and close that. So now the only responses I should get at question 2 are the ones that are selected at question 1. Now I could improve that slightly by adding a filter to check to see whether they selected more than one at question 1. I'm not going to do that in this particular example. Now let's move on to question 3. So let's copy this entry again and paste it back in and call it question 3. And this time I want to ask people to choose the brands that they've not bought but they would consider buying. So we can go to question 3, turn it to multi, change the filter to question 1, and I this time want the negative, so apply the not filter to entry. And now you'll see that it says not Q1 in here against the filters. Click OK. So now what I should get at question 3 are only the brands that weren't selected at question 1. So let's just test and see if that works. Let's test paper input. So let's select brands 1, 2 and 3 here. Now you can see that when I come to question 2, I can only pick 1, 2 and 3. I can't pick 4 and 5 because they weren't chosen at question 1. I could pick 2 here. And when we get to question 3, I can only pick 4 and 5 because they are the brands that weren't chosen at question 1. So we're getting the opposite of question 1. So that all appears to be working quite well. So that's a good example of filtering responses where you want to choose ones selected at the previous question or not selected at a previous question. Now let's move on to another type of scenario that you might encounter where you want to actually accumulate responses from one or more questions, or 2 or more questions. So now I'm going to enter another question now. I'm going to enter question 4, and I'm going to ask people which brands they have bought recently. So that's multiple responses still, and to differentiate from the other brands, we'll call them brand 1, brand 2, and we'll go down to, let's go down to brand 6. 6. Okay, there's my brands. Now when we get to question 5, I'm going to copy this list again. So I'm going to copy the entry, paste it back as question 5. And when I get to question 5, I'm going to change this to ask which brands they have ever bought. So we don't want to include the ones that they've already said here at question 4. So I'm going to add a question filter. I'm going to take out the ones that they've already given at question 4. So I guess I'm not going to call that what other brands rather than which brands. So which other brands. So we're filtering out the ones at question 4 to get any additional brands. And now at question 6, I want to ask them which is their favourite of the ones they've given at 4 and 5. Now, to be able to pick up the ones that were given at 4 and 5, I need to define a variable to accumulate, if you like, the answers at 4 and 5. So let's insert a variable. I'm going to call this Q4, Q5. Now, this is not seen this question at data collection or data entry. And the responses, I'm going to do the block insert. And you see there's an option to say or here, and I can use the shift or control key to pick those two questions. What that's going to do to me is sort of group together or together the answers from question 4 and question 5, which means now I can use that variable as a filter for question 6 when I ask them which is the favourite brand from those, if you like, given at questions 4 or 5. So we can just copy question 4 one more time, paste it in here as question 6, okay, and update that, and I can now say which is your favourite brand. I could make this a single response question if I wanted to, but I'm going to let them choose more than one favourite on this occasion. And of course the filter now comes from Q4, Q5, and I apply that list so that all that I can answer now are the answers given at question 4 or question 5, which are stored in that variable. So let's just test it out. Let's save, do another test. Do a slightly different test this time, 1, 2 and 4 on question 1. Pick 2 as my favourite, pick 3 as the most often. Now I get to the new questions. I'm going to pick 2 and 3 as the most recently, move on to question 5, pick 4 and 5 as other ones that I bought, and now you can see I can choose my favourite from 2, 3, 4 and 5, and I'm going to pick number 4, and I've reached the end of my data entry. So that appears to be working quite well. And finally we're going to look at the third scenario that you might get, and this is where you want to perhaps carry through and make data entry, or easier for the interviewer when they're carrying out CAPI, carry through responses from one question to the next to save re-entering them. So this works well with sort of spontaneous and prompted awareness questions. So let's say we've got another question now, question 7, and which brands of shampoo can you think of? And we'll enter some brands here. Let's call them brand AA, brand BB, brand CC, brand DD. So it's the 4 brands. Okay, same thing again. I'm going to copy this entry here. So copy and just paste it back as question 8. Okay, edit this. And this time it's going to be sort of prompted awareness. Which of these brands have you ever heard of? Responses, of course, are the same. But here I'm going to pre-select any answers from question 7. So this just helps somebody doing data entry. They're going to get any answers given at question 7 automatically coded at question 8. So now we can just test that and check that it works. Let's quickly go through our first questions. And now we get to question 7. So if we pick brand BB and DD, for example, we pick those two, we should find when we get to question 8, they're already selected. And so this is particularly useful at CAPI. They're already highlighted. All that the interviewer's got to do is select any additional brands that a respondent has ever heard of. It might still be wise, just in case an interviewer turns that one off, or there's a check put in place to make sure that all the brands have been carried through from the spontaneous awareness question in that example. But that completes this video then on filtering responses and carrying through responses from previous questions or variables. And of course, there's a lot more things that you can learn in the QPSMR Insight Up and Running series. I hope this was beneficial to you. Thank you.